Nancy Pelosi's call for impeaching President Trump on Ukraine risks war, ignores corruption that was fueled there by Obama and Biden. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking about House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She's calling for a formal impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. She says, quote, "The president has admitted to asking the president of Ukraine to take actions which would benefit him politically." Now, Nancy Pelosi is going to the mat for House Democrats who are obsessed with impeaching President Donald Trump. This time, it's not because he's a Russian agent. Bob Mueller already debunked that with his report that there was no conspiracy with Russia to hack the DNC or John Podesta emails and put them on WikiLeaks with the Trump campaign, which was based upon erroneous allegations made by former British spy Christopher Steele, who was working for the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign and was pursuing opposition research into Trump. And apparently the allegations were made up. Trump was no Russian agent. Bob Mueller did the investigation. It's over now. But here we are. They still want to impeach President Trump. This time they say it's because of a July 25 phone call that President Trump had with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And supposedly he was threatening to withhold military foreign aid unless former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden were investigating for pressuring, threatening to withhold $1 billion of loan guarantees if the Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin was not fired in 2016. So you have Biden, who, by his own admission, actually traveled to Ukraine and threatened loan guarantees unless the Prosecutor General was fired. And it just so happened that that Prosecutor General was investigating Burisma Holdings, on which Hunter Biden served on the board of directors. This was reported by The Hill's John Solomon, and the Shokin was not he's kind of a disgruntled employee, but he wasn't happy about being fired. And he says he was actually leading it into an investigation into a company that this natural gas firm that has U.S. ties with Hunter Biden serving on the board. Biden told the Council on Foreign Relations in January 2018 that he threatened then Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko with $1 billion in loan guarantees on firing Shokin until he caved. Quote, "I said, you're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving here in, I think it was about 6 hours. I looked at them and said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch, he got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. Again, at the time, Shokin was investigating Burisma Holdings. Hunter Biden was on the board, and he told The Hill's John Solomon that he had, quote, specific plans for the investigation, including, quote, interrogations and other crime investigation procedures into all members of the executive board, including Hunter Biden. This was reported in April of this year, and it was a bombshell at the time. But what Pelosi is doing here is actually raising the profile on Joe Biden's potential conflict of interest when he was threatening the loan guarantees to Ukraine. And I mean, are they saying that Joe Biden should have been impeached for doing this? And in the meantime, the president and the White House have just released the transcript to this conversation between Trump and president of Ukraine, and there was no pressure, there was no coercion, and there's certainly no threat of military aid in exchange for investigating Biden. What Trump did was request legal assistance on behalf of Attorney General William Barr in Barr's own investigation into the Russiagate fiasco, where Trump was falsely accused of being a Russian agent, which could have crossroads back to Ukraine. I'm not surprised by that. Politico had a piece in January of 2017 about Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump and interfere in the election that backfired. And they were trying to make amends with the Trump administration, which was just about to be inaugurated. And that there was a Ukrainian effort to apparently elect Hillary Clinton. And so maybe this investigation has something to do with that. We certainly have a mutual legal assistance treaty with Ukraine. And so it's legitimate for Trump to go through formal channels, have the Attorney General investigate potential crimes, whether it's looking at the origins of the Russiagate inquiry, looking at Hunter Biden. Maybe there were crimes committed. I don't know. Maybe there's nothing to it. But if so, then Democrats should be open to an investigation, because it will help to get to the bottom of either what happened in 2016 or what was going on with this Burisma Holdings, or the firing of the prosecutor general. Clearly, the Obama administration was threatening Ukraine with cutting off foreign aid unless they fired this prosecutor general. And this prosecutor general was certainly investigating a firm closely tied to Biden, and that might not be good for Biden. I don't know why Nancy Pelosi is raising the profile of this particular investigation, but it certainly, I don't think it bodes well for Democrats in 2020. If they're going to impeach Trump for not threatening foreign aid, he didn't do it. It's not in the transcript. You can read the transcript for yourself. It's on whitehouse.gov, and you'll see for yourself. Trump is congratulating Zelensky on his election victory. He's also a big fan of President Trump's. He says, we're 100% behind you. Thank you for, and he thanks President Trump and the United States for military and foreign aid assistance. And there's no threat. I mean, the only thing they're doing is criticizing Europe and Germany for not providing more to Ukraine. But I mean, here's Zelensky. When Trump mentions the fact that Europe is not providing enough aid to Ukraine, military assistance against Russia, there's a civil war in Ukraine. Zelensky says, yes, you are absolutely right. Quote, not only 100%, but actually 1,000%. And I can tell you the following. I did talk to Angela Merkel, and I did meet with her. I also met with Macron of France, and I told them that they're not doing quite as much as they need to be doing on the issues with the sanctions. They're not enforcing the sanctions. They are not working as much as they should work for Ukraine. It turns out that even though logically the European Union should be our biggest partner, but technically the United States is a much bigger partner than the European Union. And I'm very grateful to you for that, because the United States is doing quite a lot for Ukraine. There's no pressure here. There was no threat to the military aid. President Trump was actually doing a wider review of military aid and foreign aid, with how we dispense with foreign aid. The Trump administration wants to pursue a policy where we don't give foreign aid to unfriendly countries. And so we've been reviewing foreign aid packages, including to Ukraine. Zelensky just got elected. In April, it was a landslide. So you have a new president over there, and Trump wants to make certain that the new president of Ukraine is somebody that we can trust with the military assistance. And so they put a brief pause on the funding. The funding was released on September 11th. And so whatever legal concern there was with withholding funds under Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution is moot right now. OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, they can do deferrals of funding. They can do rescissions of funding proposed to Congress. And they can put pauses on and freezes on funding when there's a problem. There were unspent balances on the wider foreign aid packages to countries besides Ukraine, and they put a brief pause on that and said, agencies, please conduct a review of these unspent monies. Do you need the money anymore? We can request a rescission. And they completed the review, and all of the aid was released. So Trump was briefly reviewing foreign aid packages, and now Nancy Pelosi wants to impeach President Trump. I think that's fallacious. And so there's a few problems with Pelosi's allegations right out of the gate. I think this transcript that the president and the White House have provided, where Zelensky seems eager to help President Trump on matters related to legal assistance. Trump asked for legal assistance on the Burisma Holdings, the firing of the prosecutor. He also asked for assistance on the Barr investigation into the origins of the Russia witch hunt. And I think that's totally legitimate. Barr has already testified before Congress about investigating the origins, and the fact that it's leading to Ukraine, again, is not surprising. Again, Politico had the story in 2017 that there were also Ukrainian efforts to interfere in the elections, and so maybe it has something to do with that. Maybe we're about to find out what was going on there. And I think that's legitimate. Let the facts lead where they may. Just because Democrats don't like President Trump or Attorney General Barr doesn't mean that they're not supposed to fulfill their constitutional and legal duties. Let's see. Although media outlets reported widely that Trump admitted to pressuring Zelensky on the call, Trump says all he was doing was criticizing Biden's role in the corruption. I think that's accurate. We had a great conversation, Trump said, on September 22. The conversation I had was largely congratulatory, was largely about corruption. All the corruption taking place was largely the fact that we don't want our people, like Vice President Biden and his son, creating the corruption already into Ukraine. So Trump wants anything that the Ukrainian prosecutors have on the, and again, they're supposed to provide legal cooperation. We have a treaty with them. We help them on legal matters as well. And oh, by the way, Democrats were requesting that the Ukraine general prosecutor cooperate with the Mueller probe when that was still going on. At the time, Bob Mueller had all of the powers of the Attorney General under acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and they were requesting that Ukraine cooperate with the Justice Department. What is Trump doing? He is requesting that Ukraine cooperate with the Justice Department. What's the argument for saying cooperate with Mueller but not with Barr? There is no argument. Pelosi can't have an impeachment over that. That's stupid. I mean, it was a very risky move. She went out there without any evidence. She didn't have the transcript in hand. And so they just led with, oh, we're just going to impeach Trump because this looks bad. You know who it looks bad for? Joe Biden. I mean, frankly, this looks really bad for Joe Biden, and it could be really bad for Democrats more generally as it relates to the Russia witch hunt and what role Ukraine might have played there. Sounds like Zelensky wants to help Trump get to the bottom of whatever happened there. And so maybe that's what they're terrified about, but maybe they're just angry that Trump wants to find out more about Joe Biden and Burisma Holdings. I mean, and threatening the foreign aid and cutting off $1 billion. That the Obama administration did. Now, Obama can certainly threaten foreign aid to foreign countries. He was the president. Biden was acting on his behalf. I'm not saying anything illegal happened with threatening the foreign aid, but Democrats are. But they have no opinion about what Biden did. They don't even want to mention it. They just want to pretend like it doesn't exist. And we're supposed to have a serious conversation about impeachment. It's one of the most serious things in our country is the impeachment clause. You'd have to get a majority of the House. You have to get 2/3 of the Senate to sign off on getting rid of President Trump on apparently fallacious allegations. The military aid has already been released. The wider freeze of foreign aid has already been released. Trump on September 24 said of temporarily withholding but ultimately releasing the aid, quote, as far as withholding funds goes, the funds were paid, but my complaint has always been, and I'd withhold again, and I'll continue to withhold until such time as Europe and other nations contribute to Ukraine. You can read the transcript for yourself. That is what the president was talking about. And so I think this is a big problem for Democrats, not for President Trump. The facts actually lead to Joe Biden. They lead to whatever the intelligence agencies were doing in Ukraine against President Trump. And there could be more to the election interference story than we've been told. But Trump's impeachable offense in Pelosi's eyes was merely mentioning Biden's blatant conflict of interest when Biden urged the firing of the Ukrainian prosecutor who says he was investigating the company Biden's son worked for and threatened U.S. foreign aid over. That was already public information. Trump wasn't telling anything to Zelensky that he didn't already know about Biden. You read the transcript, he says, yeah, I know all about that. So ALG, Americans for Limited Government President Rick Manning blasted Pelosi's impeachment announcement in a statement. He said, only Nancy Pelosi could learn Vice President Joe Biden engaged in a blatant abuse of power in Ukraine to protect his son from potential prosecution and decided it is grounds to impeach President Trump for denouncing such corruption, even if Americans were involved. Indeed, only Nancy Pelosi, only in America. But after the 2016 and the phony Russian witch hunt, I think anything's possible here. None of this is really surprising anymore. And the depths of corruption that we're seeing here is just unbelievable. They're gonna wreck this country and tear this country in half over phony allegations. And in the meantime, they're risking war with Russia over Ukraine. We had, in 2014, before Russia annexed Crimea, we were helping to overthrow Viktor Yanukovych. He was backed by Russia. Okay, he was a friend of Russia. But he gets removed from power, and apparently the Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, was caught on tape helping to organize the coup. This was in BBC back in 2014. This is all public information. You can look it up yourself, which immediately preceded Russia's backing the succession of Crimea from Ukraine. They had a referendum, by the way. Did you know they had a referendum? This failed U.S. intervention destabilized the region and risked wider war. There's a civil war in Ukraine. It's been going on for years now, and we helped to start it. What President Trump appears to be doing is mending fences with Ukraine and diffusing the ongoing civil war. In 2019, it reviewed and then granted again with the new president the military aid to serve as a check against Russia. He's asking Europe to pay more to Ukraine to support them, to serve as a check against Russia. And in the meantime, the U.S. absolutely has an interest in Ukraine to avoid a wider conflict. The nuclear war with Russia would be catastrophic. It's an existential threat to humanity. So tamping down this hotspot is very wise by President Trump. The fact that we're going to go and look at Russiagate as it relates to Ukraine, it may actually help the situation to put this all behind us and actually get a full accounting of what really happened in 2016. So this is a potential hot spot. Now, we only get one president at a time. If Biden wants the job, he has to get elected first, but not before he has to answer for what he did with the foreign aid with Ukraine, threatening to cut it off unless the prosecutor who was going after the company his son worked for was fired. The prosecutor was fired. Biden should have to answer for this. I don't see how this helps him. He's falling in the polls already in New Hampshire. And I'll leave you with the close here. This is just an unbelievable situation. In 2016, Trump blasted the Obama administration's conduct in Ukraine and warned that the nation was risking war. The president is allowed to pursue that policy, and he's allowed to criticize his predecessor's failures. If there's misconduct during the Obama years in Ukraine, let it be known, and let's do better next time. Like it or not, President Trump's job right now is to keep the peace in Ukraine, and he has a good relationship, apparently, with the new president there. Thank goodness he is not itching for war. We need to be careful and prudent in our approach and attempt to diffuse any potential conflict. But if Trump is impeached by the House in a blind frenzy for trying to avoid an unnecessary war with Russia over Ukraine and improving relations in that region that Obama and Biden clearly wrecked, it may very well cause one. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.